From the heartland of America, focused on God, family, and country, the mouthpiece of the Midwest. This is Dale Carter's America.
And we're back with Dale Carter's America, the podcast, on a very important day, Kurt. This is the first day of the college basketball season.
Oh, boy.
And I'm wearing my University of Southern Indiana Screaming Eagles hoodie as the Eagles are going to take on the Billikens in St. Louis.
The Billikens?
The Billikens of the University of St. Louis.
What the heck is a Billiken?
I have no idea. But I know what a Screaming Eagle is. You know, it's the national bird of the United States of America, and my university is red, white, and blue. All American. So.
Yeah, no, Billikens, is that supposed to be an animal? It's like a pelican mixed with a
I don't know. It's
bills?
probably racist. You know, if you think about it, it probably is.
You're right.
But we'll get into all that stuff later. We do have a little story about racism and birds. I'm not making it up. This is a true story that we'll get to a little bit later on.
We're just teasing the end of the episode.
In the podcast. We want to, again, thank Bob Watson. He is our State Farm agent here at Dale Carter's America. You should really check on, especially as we go to the end of the year, how you can bundle your home and car insurance and save even more with State Farm. And when you're using State Farm, you ought to go with our guy, Bob Watson. I mean, if you think the way that we do, you listen to this podcast, you must. Bob Watson is your guy, 7th and Main in Blue Springs, but he's licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. You can reach him at 816-229-7878. Auto, home, life. Again, bundling is the word these days as we come toward the end of the year and you're thinking about your homeowner's insurance and always checking on your car insurance. This episode is going to drop on Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
I really wish that I had put this in last week's episode. It's going to be too late, but I'm hoping that through Facebook and the posts that I made, that there's enough of us in Dale Carter's America who live in what is currently Jackson County that we can get to the polls tomorrow and vote no on the latest cash grab by Jackson County. Now, I understand, and one of my liberal friends pushed back that, we have things and we need to pay for the things, and I get all that, and I have supported things in the past. I supported the $500 million to improve Arrowhead Stadium and Kauffman Stadium. Okay, so I did it, and I also approved I voted yes on the tax for the Kansas City Zoo. And in principle, I'm okay with an internet use tax. I really am. I mean, I supported it twice in Blue Springs. So I'm on board in principle. But I'm just so pissed at Jackson County over this assessment thing and just how the courthouse is constructed now. They're fools and or criminals down there. I mean, they're incompetent and or what's the word I'm looking for?
Malicious.
Yeah. That works, I guess. But what they're asking for is 1.38% on internet purchases, much of it going for roads and bridges and things like that are covered by the current gas tax. They've also folded in homelessness, maintenance of county buildings. I'm going to vote no, and we are still trying to leave this county. And my friend who pushed back on me lives in Kansas City, and I said, look, I mean, you should be for us leaving because we're a bunch of knuckle draggers. We're just holding you down, right? You guys could do whatever you want to do and have your own little island here to do whatever you want to do, and we'll leave. And she thought that was kind of funny. But if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, you're seeing Kurt scrolling through what this sales tax thing is all about. And I hope next week when we meet again for the podcast, we're going to say that it was defeated. I just can't imagine, Kurt, in the current environment, with the assessments that just went down, the debacle that went down with that, how anybody would vote yes on any kind of a tax on a ballot in Jackson County right now.
Yeah, it seems like there's a new one every time. There's a new tax that they're putting on the ballot every time it comes up. So, it's pretty telling. It's like they're desperate for our money so they can fund all their projects.
Well, and that's all we are in Eastern Jackson County. We are the piggy bank for downtown Kansas City.
Yeah.
And, I wish we could move this thing forward faster. I call Jeff Coleman every week, and he's like, research is still working on this thing. I'm not sure how long it takes to produce a petition that we could get signed, that we could get signatures on, that we could get on a ballot and get out of Jackson County. Just know that I'm pushing the gas pedal as hard as I can. And right now the ball is in the state of Missouri's court, and we're trying to get that petition because it's got to be worded exactly right, or else it'll just fall through the floor anyway, and we don't want to fail. We got one shot at this. We want to do it right. All right, let's just dive right in here. The latest on the Israeli war against the terrorists of Hamas. Biden, was saying that Israel should do whatever it needs to do, right? Until he got to a fundraiser. Did you see this? And a woman in the crowd who was, I guess, a rabbi, she's yelling out that we should have a pause for humanitarian reasons, right? And Biden says, I agree, we ought to have a pause. And just like that, from the podium at a fundraiser, public policy was made. Then everybody down the line, Kirby had to get on board, Blinken had to get on board, and now they're saying that the United States supports some sort of, humanitarian pause. Well, the Israelis are like, screw that. We're tired of this. We took a terrorist attack, just like the United States took on 9/11, and it's a lot closer to them. Gaza's right on their doorstep. And they're going to go in there, and they're going to root out every last one of these damn terrorists, and I'm behind them. 100%. They've got to do what they want to do.
Mr. President, any progress on the humanitarian pause?
Yes.
Mr. President,
there you have it.
Any progress on
Yes. Thumbs
Yes.
up. Well, you know
it's
what?
about as eloquent of an answer as you're going to get from me.
And I wanted to have a discussion on this because I know that you and I are maybe not 100% on the same page on this. The world that we live in is the world that was voted on in 2020. When Joe Biden won that election, it changed the world. So this is the world that we have. And all of a sudden, you've got people like Vladimir Putin emboldened to do things that he would not have done had Donald Trump won a second term. China's emboldened to do things. Iran, Donald Trump negated that horrible deal that Barack Obama made. Well, Biden said, well, we're just going to go right back to him again. So they're emboldened. So that's the world that we live in, right?
Yeah.
If Trump were still there, I don't think any of this would have happened.
I agree.
This has nothing to do with Orange Man bad. This has to do with actual public policy, getting beyond the personalities involved here to the actual public policy. And this is the world we live in. So it's a shit burger. So what do? What's the best way forward? Kurt.
Well, my opinion is that we stay the hell out of it. I mean, like I've said before, I do not support Hamas, and I also don't really support Israel. So I think that we need to be America first. It's troubling to see that we have a new Speaker of the House. We have, budget deadlines quickly approaching in Congress. And instead of working on appropriations, instead of working on closing the border, instead of working on, the economy and things that are really hurting Americans, we're focused on how are we going to get money to Israel, and we're arguing about whether we're going to package it with Ukrainian funding, what are we going to package it with? But that's our priority. So that just shows you where our priority is, where of our elected leaders. And
well, I get you want to stay out of it, but let's face it, they're our ally, so we're there. We've got 2 aircraft carriers and strike groups over there now. We've got bases in the Middle East right now, so we are there. I mean, that's the world that we live in as well, so we just have to deal with it. Barack Obama came out and said that what needs to happen is a 2-state solution. We've been saying that for decades. There needs to be a 2-state solution. But how do you force a 2-state solution? I think the Israelis would be okay with it. It's the other side that won't accept the 2-state solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit more nuance to that, though. There, like you mentioned last week, and I just pulled something up somewhere here. The 2000 summit at Camp David,
right.
As an example of that. And yeah, I mean that there wasn't an agreement reached, but the sides didn't agree.
Ehud Barak gave him everything he wanted. Yasser Arafat, we're talking about, and Arafat left because that's the Palestinian side on this thing. They will not be happy until every Jew in Israel is either moved out of Israel or dead. Those are the only 2 options.
I'm pulling up this link right now. Yeah, and I mean I've been kind of trying to do some research on this as well, because it is sort of an area of ignorance, for me. But according to some of the stuff that I've been looking at, I'll just show this article so you guys can look it up on your own if you want. But at that particular summit, the agreement that was proposed involved Gaza, territorial control of Gaza and the West Bank, or most of the West Bank, to Arafat. But Israel still controlled Jerusalem, including all of the eastern sectors of Jerusalem, the Arab sectors of Jerusalem. They still controlled all of the water and the electricity and the utilities going into the Palestinian territories. So I think it's a little bit ignorant and short-sighted, not directing this at you per se, but to just assume that it's like, oh, well, they're just the good guy and they're just the bad guy. It's a very complicated situation. Both sides are looking for the best for them. What Israel wants, honestly, is probably to have, continue to have control over the Palestinian territories like they currently do. It's not an established country. Israel does control all of the utilities. They control who goes in and out. And right now they're bombing the crap out of him, including bombing, innocent people. So that's a problem too. And we should be calling that out as well. In addition to the terrorism that's coming from Hamas. So it's all jacked up over there. There are no good sides, in my opinion. I think both sides are doing some really terrible things, and I don't think we should be supporting it.
Well, one thing that I would say is a step too far is the person in the Israeli government who suggested dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza. Did you see that? I mean, that's way too steep.
I've seen a lot of people say similar things, and it's like, well, yeah, the common retort that you hear from people, you'll point out, well, there's a lot of innocent people in the Gaza Strip, for example. There's Hamas for sure, and Hamas, Israel has a right to defend itself. If they're attacked, they have the right as their own sovereign country, with their own resources to go and take out the people who carried out the attack. But the problem is, in Gaza, there's a lot of children, there's a lot of innocent people, and they're kind of trapped there. They don't really have anywhere to go. They can't get out. They're blocked by walls on all sides. Their utilities and everything are controlled by the Israelis, so they're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. And you have a lot of people that are supporting the Israeli side, saying, "Well, just flatten Gaza, just take them all out."
Well,
just
I'm not saying that, but you're forgetting the almost 2,000 people who were killed in October in the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel.
No, I'm not forgetting that. I'm not forgetting that at all. I'm not forgetting that at all.
Some women and children involved in that too, right?
For sure. For sure. I'm sure there were. I'm sure there were, for sure.
The legitimate,
which is why I said, both sides are committing acts of atrocity.
The good Palestinian people should give up the terrorists, get them out of their country.
How?
They're hiding behind them.
Right. So that's a common retort that I hear a lot is like, well, the reason that hospitals or whatever are being bombed is because Hamas is hiding behind civilians. And it's like, okay, well, then that means that you can't bomb them.
Hamas bombed the hospital, in case you don't know that.
Right. No,
Hamas bombed the hospital.
I'm speaking, I mean, that's kind of a little murky, but I take that at face value. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, like, we saw this in World War II as well, like with bombing of civilian areas. And in hindsight, we look at that and we say that wasn't okay. We look back at what Obama did and even Bush, during some of the other wars that we've had in the Middle East. They bombed civilian areas, they bombed weddings, they bombed hospitals, and killed a lot of innocent people. So we should be against that, and the response should be proportional and should not be carried out against civilians. And it's like, okay, if they're hiding behind civilians, if they're hiding in these areas behind children and stuff, then carpet bombing the area is not an acceptable option. You have to find a more targeted approach. You have to go in there. I mean, Israel has like the most advanced military possibly in the world next to the United States. They have the ability, I'm sure, to go in there with more targeted attacks.
How do you know they're not?
Maybe they are, but they're also bombing the shit out of the entire area. I mean,
right.
So I think we should be able to call out both sides here. And it's like there's this weird thing where, and obviously, like I said before, completely condemn Hamas. I completely condemn any form of terrorism. Any
Hezbollah.
Any act of aggression against civilians. Sending paragliders over and attacking civilian areas is totally wrong and totally uncalled for. But I just think it's interesting that you have a certain sect of people, and including people on the right, where as soon as you're like, well, yeah, that's wrong, but maybe we shouldn't be like just indiscriminately bombing these civilian areas because that's also wrong and that's also a problem. Well, you're an anti-Semite. You don't support Israel. What are you, a Hamas sympathizer? And it's just like, it's so disillusioning. It's like, I just can't stand these people. Well, and then you have the people on the left that are crazy out there, doing these rallies and stuff for Palestine. And it's just, they're all idiots, man. I don't support either side. I don't support any of what's going on. America first. Let's get the hell out of there. That's my opinion.
All right. Well, that's your opinion. My opinion is Israel is our ally, and they were attacked by terrorists, and they're a sovereign country. And I tell them to do whatever they want to do, whatever they need to do. The political fallout in this country continues. The loony left in Congress and on college campuses. I don't know if you saw this, but Congress voted. This is the House of Representatives, which is pretty evenly split. Voted 396 to 23, condemning support for Hamas and Hezbollah on college campuses in the United States. To your point about the rallies, the pro-Palestinian rallies that are going on here. Not pro-Palestinian. Let's put a finer point on that. The pro-Hamas and Hezbollah rallies and tearing down.
Yeah, I don't know about that, man. I think that's a little bit of a straw man. I got to call you out on that because I'm sure that I think that there have been many examples of people within those rallies that are pro-Hamas. There's been plenty of people on Twitter, very stupid people that are out there saying, yes, I support Hamas, kill the Israelis or whatever. That's true. But to just blanket, say that everyone at these rallies supporting Palestine or the Palestinians are terrorist sympathizers is just, it's ridiculous. It's just not true.
I'm worried about you. You're like going over to the other side, man. You're going to the squad.
I'm just trying to be honest here, I'm just trying to be honest because we have this problem where, we're like the anti-war side, we're the, this new right movement that we're seeing, and it's a lot of the same people. It's people like, a big one is Ben Shapiro. I hate to call him out, but they're all anti-war. Oh, Biden's, sending all these troops, or Obama's sending all these troops. Look at all this terrible stuff he's doing. American soldiers are dying. We need to be America first. We need to get out of these foreign wars. And then as soon as Israel is involved, it's like, bomb the crap out of them. Send all our money there. And it's like, do you not see what you're doing? Do you not see this? I'm just trying to be honest here. I'm trying to be intellectually honest. And it's just, again, nobody's doing it.
Let me go back to the beginning of this segment. If Donald Trump were the president, I don't think any of this would have been happening.
I totally agree.
But it's the world that we live in with Joe Biden's foreign policy. That's what's brought us to this. Joe Biden's foreign policy. You can trace every debacle that's happened now in the last 3 years to a Joe Biden decision, emboldening our enemies, emboldening terrorists. And that's the world that we live in. And until we make a change at the top and in foreign policy, we're not going to stem this tide.
Yeah. Yeah, and somebody brought up a good point that I was listening to as well. And here's just some clips. This is in D.C. There's a bunch of big protests over the weekend, and then there was this other one actually in Kansas City. There was a protest over the weekend. And to be like I said, to reiterate what I said, I'm not on the side of these people. I do not support the Palestinians. I do not support Hamas. I think, these are the same people that were all over BLM and the COVID stuff and are, disproportionately, I'm sure, very ignorant leftists, and I do not support them.
All right.
But yeah, there's a lot going on.
Okay, we'll move on from this. We got a lot more to talk about today. It's Medicare open enrollment time, and that's an important time if you're a senior citizen. 65 is when Medicare kicks in, but let's say that you got on Medicare and you did the exact wrong thing for you. Medicare Simplified KC is ready to step in and help. Kirk Doris and Lori Hawker, they'll take a look at your situation and find the right thing that you should be doing. Okay. Medicare open enrollment goes on through December 7th. It's a great time to look at your overall plan and make sure that you are on the right path. You'll get a free quote. In fact, they won't charge you anything. They make their money from the insurance companies. They've helped save thousands of individuals money and navigate this Medicare maze that's out there. And if you can't go to them, they'll come to you with in-home appointments available. They're 3600 South Nolan Road. Their office number is 816-701-6661. Easy to find on the web with the name MedicareSimplifiedKC.com. If you're approaching 65, get ahead of this. If you're over 65 and you made some mistakes, Kirk and Lori will help you, again, navigate that world. If you're a little bit younger than 65, let's say you're 45 and haven't had your colonoscopy yet, Dr. Mark Taramina and his staff at Midwest GI Health and Wellness, they are ready to help you, because if we catch colon cancer early, we can fix it. We can cure it. It's when you don't get the colonoscopy and you get a little bit older and it's been allowed to grow and fester, that's when there are problems. So get your screening. They do the upper GI as well. They've got a complete staff. They are ready to help you. They get huge. They get 4.9 out of 5 stars on Google rating. That is the highest in Kansas City. So if somebody's going to put you to sleep for a little bit so you can take a nap and they're going to ram a hose up your ass, don't you want to go with the best in Kansas City? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. Great reviews.
As a young guy, you haven't had to deal with this yet, but they are moving that line lower. It used to be 50. 50 was kind of like the gold standard for a long time, and now it's 45. So get ahead of any kind of a problem in that area. Upper GI, lower GI, they got the whole track covered there for you at Midwest GI Health. All right, so as we record this on Monday, we are less than a year away from the next presidential election in this country. In fact, a year from now, we should know, right? And I think we will know, because if you're looking at polling in battleground states, 5 key battleground states that Joe Biden won, Donald Trump is ahead by as much as 10 points at this point. That's how bad things are. Now, I put up a little meme on our Facebook page that showed Joe Biden in a dumpster with a fire, and it's basically the state of our union right now. Yet there is still a hard 24% who think he's doing a great job. Don't you want to meet these people?
Yeah.
And wonder what they're, because again, the question becomes, and Ronald Reagan did it so eloquently when he faced Jimmy Carter on that debate stage. We can't say 4 years because it's only 3 years ago, but the question is, are you better off than you were 3 years ago? Is the country better off than it was 3 years ago? And if you believe that, I'd love to know what metric you're basing that on.
Yeah, I don't know.
Look at the economy. The stock market's been up like 5 days in a row. Do you know why the stock market has gone straight up the last 5 days? Because the economy is so bad right now that it looks like the Fed won't be raising rates anymore. Bad news equals good news. It's good for my 401k. If you've got one, it's good for you. Good for my IRA. But it doesn't tell you that the country is really healthy right now. That's the only reason that the stock market is going up. Crushing debt is now causing interest payments on that debt to be paid with borrowed money. Think about that for a second, because the budget, we're in a deficit. We've been in a deficit for a while now, but it's gotten so bad that we can't even afford, out of tax revenue coming into the government, to pay the interest on the debt. Now we're borrowing that money.
Yeah, not even close.
Downward spiral is where we are. And if that's not enough, how about the EV update? The big three, they're all excited. They've gotten their deal done with the UAW. Huge new contract, huge raises coming at a time when all three of the big three were all in on this, manufactured EV thing. And guess what? Nobody wants to buy them. Almost went into a Joe Biden thing. Guess what? Nobody wants to buy them, Kurt. Nobody wants to buy them. Yeah, they're just sitting there. Okay, So think about this. On the front end of this, we financed this thing through incentives. The only reason that EVs were anywhere near competitive with gas-powered vehicles is because the taxpayers paid for incentives.
Yeah.
You're with me on that, right?
Tax credits,
Yeah. So now what's going to happen? they've got this new agreement with the UAW. They're on the hook for big raises, right? They bought all in on EV. You talk about a downward spiral. That's where the auto industry is going. So you know what the next thing is? I'm just going to predict it right now. They're going to say, gosh, we can't move forward without a bailout. We need a government bailout. So we bailed them out in the beginning, and we're going to bail them out on the back end.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate because the financial situation is spiraling so hard. You know, it's going to take somebody just ripping off the Band-Aid, really, to fix it. And it's not going to be pretty. You know, somebody's going to have to take all that heat and say, well, all these people are going to lose their jobs. All these government workers, you know, we have to fund the government. All these government workers are going to be out of work. It's like, well, you know, we should have dealt with this a long time ago, but it's got to be done. And someone's going to have to rip off the Band-Aid. So who's that going to be?
I had Chris Matthews on my show years ago even. I mean, and I was talking about this years ago. This is before the podcast. He had a new book out. And I asked him at that time, you know, are we heading toward, I think Obama was president when I asked him this question, are we headed to a point where we're going to have to reboot the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. Just hit reboot and start over and say, okay, this is what it takes to fund this government and get rid of all this other stuff and figure out how we're going to pay for that and move forward. What you just said, a lot simpler, is rip the Band-Aid off. And he said, no, we're not going to need to do that because Chris Matthews is a good old-fashioned liberal, and there's never enough government for the liberals.
Yeah. You know, honestly, I mean, another version of ripping the Band-Aid off is if we had a president who, and Trump would never do this, this is purely hypothetical, but if we had a president who got elected and then got in office and basically just said, stop paying your taxes, and we just had like tens of millions of people just stop paying their taxes. They can't come after all of us at once, and it's going to force some serious changes. But again, that's a very
pretty radical
solution. But you know, that's maybe what it'll take.
Well, I'm thinking about that in Jackson County as far as my property taxes, because I saw that report that if I pay my property taxes, maybe I can't be part of a class action lawsuit against the courthouse downtown, because by paying my taxes, I'm basically saying I agree with this whole system.
Right.
So I don't know what's going to happen with that. You mentioned Donald Trump. Since we're talking about the election coming up a year from now, it looks like it's going to be Trump and Biden. Although, you know, I mentioned those 5 battleground states where Trump is ahead by as much as 10. He's definitely more than the error. What's
margin of error?
Margin of error. Thank you. In those states, so Axelrod is basically saying to Joe Biden, you should drop out. And he was Obama's guy. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Joe Biden is going to run. I still don't. I mean, he's getting worse every day. 5 more years of the presidency on that frame.
Well, I also don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that these polls are to be believed and that the election is going to be honest. You know, that's a big assumption right there. We saw what happened last time around with COVID and all the changing of the rules illegally in many cases. And, you know, we just had a local election, I think in Georgia or something like that. They caught some lady stuffing a ballot box with mail-in ballots, and they called the whole election off. They're redoing it or something like that. And I mean, the amount of video that we have of stuff exactly like that happening in the last presidential election is astounding, and nothing remotely approaching, you know, any sort of acceptable criticism was allowed. So, you know, that's a big question too coming up to this next election. I mean, the establishment, the swamp, the Biden administration, the liberal establishment wants to keep themselves in power by any means necessary. So these polls, you know, are one thing, but I mean, are we going to have mass mail-in ballots? Are we going to have changing of the rules? Are we going to have people, you know, stuffing suitcases in the middle of the night and votes coming in at 4 a.m. all for one guy? Who knows? But I think it's Americans generally are very disillusioned with the entire voting process. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't vote. You should absolutely go vote, but, you know, that's just the way that it is now.
Donald Trump is in a New York courtroom testifying today because Letitia, whatever her name is, James, she went after him. She ran basically saying, I'm going to get Trump, right? That was her slogan. I'm going to get Trump. Never mind crime in the state of New York. I'm going to go after Trump. Yep. And her goal is to get like a $250 million fine or something like that, and then run him out of New York where he can't do business there anymore. Wouldn't it be funny if Donald Trump just said, you know what? I'm moving my base of operations to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Good luck to you, New York.
Yeah.
And just left. I mean, that's one of the things that he's facing right now. But who knows? All I know is a year from now, hopefully we're going to wake up and we're going to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is not a train. And what a great time to remind you about Clay Como Shooters. You can shop firearms. They've got range memberships, training. They train law enforcement. In fact, they are former law enforcement. Pistols, rifles, ammo, accessories, because you never know what's coming. And I know Joe Biden says, hey, you want to fight against the government, you better get an F-15. I'm not so much worried about the government at this point. I'm worried about the people coming across the southern border.
Yep.
Anybody care about that?
And criminals here, too. I mean, we have plenty of those here.
We have plenty of those. In fact, I-70 was closed for 4 hours overnight. I drove by this on my way into work this morning. Do you know the story behind that? Somebody stole a Chevy Equinox and took off like a bandit down I-70. And guess what? Lost control and hit an F-150. And a good Samaritan got out of their car and tried to help. That person was killed by a vehicle.
Jeez.
And there was somebody dead in the Equinox. And it all started with a stolen vehicle. Protect yourself with Clay Como Shooters. They're on the web at claycomoshooters.com. They're right there on 69 Highway in Clay Como, right between I-35 and 435. They've got training. They invite you to come train with them because if you buy a weapon from Clay Como Shooters, they want you trained. They want to make sure that you're using that thing effectively if you have to. claycomoshooters.com. That is the website. Make sure you got the roof over your house ready to go. And, if we've had any kind of weather like hail or whatever, you need to get that roof inspected. And what happens anytime that we have hail in this area is all the bottom feeders come out. And I did this myself back in 2005. I got my roof replaced by a bottom feeder. They did a horrible job, and when I tried to call them, they were nowhere to be found. Royal Roofing and Solar is not a bottom feeder. They're a great company in Cass County. Austin Watterson and his family. It's a family-owned company, and they would love to come out and take a look at your roof and give you an honest assessment of it. That's what they did before they put the new roof on my house. 816-540-7057. And if you're going to be there a while, perhaps you turn that house into its own energy producer with solar. They can explain that to you. It may work, it may not work, but you'll get an honest answer. 816-540-7057. And they're on the web. What is the website? I don't have that written down.
So they have two websites. So for solar, go to solarbyroyal.com, solarbyroyal.com. And for roofing, go to royalcontractingkc.com. royalcontractingkc.com.
And if you just want to have a cold beer and say to hell with all of it, just go to Funhouse Pizza. Jim Dingman will take care of you with an awesome pizza, piled high with toppings, cold beverages. And again, if you've got like a victory party for your football team, your soccer team, whatever sport is in season right now, the end of the season, you got to have your banquet or whatever, have it at Funhouse Pizza. They're in Lee's Summit on 50 Highway, Blue Springs on 7 Highway. Always a great time at Funhouse Pizza. Whenever we do the live events of Dale Carter's America, the podcast, we pick one of the Funhouse Pizza locations. I think Blue Springs is going to be next. Listen for that. That announcement could be coming at any day. Now, we talked about Biden. We talked a little bit about Trump. Let's talk about the person that the Democrats don't want to talk about, and that is the person who is a heartbeat away from the presidency, the Vice President, Kamala Harris. And, the critics of the way we think would say we criticize her, Kurt, because she's a black woman. Mm-hmm. That's why we criticize her. If she were an old white guy, we wouldn't be criticizing on any of this stuff. I counter that we criticize her because she's stupid and she's tone deaf. And no race or gender has a monopoly on that. Kamala Harris is now in charge of AI policy, artificial intelligence. I mean, come on. The jokes just write themselves. She was the border czar, and how's that working out for us now?
Yep.
So they've given her this job. And before we get to the clip on this, it is interesting to me that there are people on the Democrat side trying to push Joe Biden out. And not one of them is saying that Kamala Harris ought to step up. Why do you think that is? Are they racist?
Probably.
Are they sexist?
I think so, yeah.
A woman can't do this job, especially a black woman can't do this job.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous on its face. This black woman is a disaster.
Well, you know, she's the AI lady. It kind of maybe explains a lot because when she talks, she kind of sounds like a robot sometimes, like a broken record, you know? So maybe she's the experimental AI technology that she's talking about.
Well, the big issue in AI, as you know, is equity.
Yes.
Equity is the word, and that is what's in this clip from the vice president.
All to help make sure that the benefits of AI are shared equitably and to address predictable threats, such as algorithmic discrimination, data privacy violations, and deepfakes. We named it the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights.
I'm going to play that again. Just look at Joe's face. Like, what do you think he's thinking about here? Just a little
Ice cream.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I got chocolate chip ice cream in the freezer when I get home.
All to help make sure that the benefits of AI are shared equitably and to address predictable threats, such as algorithmic discrimination, data privacy violations, and deepfakes. We named it the
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip.
All right. So what's this? What do you have on Obama next?
People are you know, obviously pointing out that Kamala is inept and incompetent in being in charge of anything, and she's been so-called put in charge of the AI thing. But it's come out recently, too, that there's potentially another person who's been kind of heavily involved in this. From NBC News, former President Obama quietly advised the White House over the past 5 months on its strategy to address AI, engaging behind the scenes with tech companies and holding Zoom meetings with White House aides at Biden's request, aides to both men say. So, I mean, that obviously brings up the question, you know, what else is he doing? You know what I mean? I think everyone understands that Biden is not a competent person. He's hardly alive. So who is actually running things? And
you think
maybe
Barack is?
Maybe Obama's sort of behind the scenes, maybe not pulling the strings, but at least, you know, making moves, talking to people. You know, as it says here, he's quietly advising. You know, so. Maybe that's what he's up to.
Well, a lot of times you'll quote the Babylon Bee, and it is pure political satire. And the Babylon Bee had a meme about the government's response to anti-Semitism, which is on the rise in this country as a result of what's going on over in Israel right now. It was a campaign on Islamophobia. That was the satire from the Babylon Bee. Our vice president took satire and made it public policy.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the story that you were talking about, but this is a Babylon Bee article that I thought was funny. Ilhan Omar, anti-Semitism wouldn't be a problem if we got rid of all the Jews.
Yeah. Well, she didn't go that far. Kamala Harris didn't go that far. But she in the face of anti-Semitism, though, you know, she talks about Islamophobia.
Yeah. This is a longer clip, so I might have to try it.
To worship and to be without fear of violence or persecution. Every person has the right to live safe from violence, hate, and bigotry.
Blah, blah,
and for those
blah.
reasons and so many more, President Joe Biden and I have a duty, not only to keep the people of our nation safe, but to condemn unequivocally and forcefully all forms of hate. Since we took office, President Biden and I have fought to uphold that duty. Over the past decade, America has seen a rise in attacks on houses of worship. So in response, we expanded funding to protect houses of worship from violence. After a surge in hate during the pandemic, in particular anti-Asian hate, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to improve the reporting of hate crimes and to ensure hate crimes are investigated quickly and thoroughly. Earlier this year, in response to an historic rise in anti-Semitic attacks, we also released the first national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And to make clear, taking on hate is a national priority. President Biden and I held the first White House summit to address hate-fueled violence, and we brought together religious leaders, community leaders, and survivors.
I can only take so much of that.
I don't think that's the clip.
Well, she goes on to talk about Islamophobia later in the clip, but it's just all bullshit.
Where are the examples of Islamophobia?
Where are the examples of anti-Semitism?
How about the college campuses where they're ripping down the posters of the hostages that Hamas is keeping? That is happening. There's video proof of that.
No, okay. I mean, I'll believe you. I haven't seen that.
There are a lot of anti-Semitic acts going on right now. I don't think there's a lot of Islamophobia going on right now.
Would you agree, though, that it's certainly the case that with both, quote-unquote anti-Semitism and quote-unquote Islamophobia, people tend to inflate criticism or opposition to, fear or phobia. It's like you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. You criticize Islam, as a religion, or you criticize Hamas, or you criticize Iran, you're Islamophobic. And it's just like we can't even have honest conversations anymore because we're just immediately called a name,
Well, we went through this
It's
after
ridiculous.
9/11, and I was very vehement on my show on KFKF that we did not have an argument with people of the Islamic faith. That was not where we were. Our argument and our fight was against the terrorists, those who would attack this country. I mean, it's kind of like, it's the act, right? It's the act of doing something. It's not your faith. It's the act of doing something. And when you cross the line, my rights extend to you, your rights extend to me. And when I take rights from you that aren't mine, I mean, that's where we have a problem.
Well, yeah, but in that specific case, I mean, the act is influenced by their faith. It is an act based on faith. That it is Islam that is the motivating.
I don't know
force.
that that's true. I mean, Islam is a religion of peace. When you bastardize
Is that a joke?
That's not a joke. It's a religion of peace, just as
boy.
Christianity is. But you could go to the Old Testament and you could bastardize that and use that to basically cover anything that you do.
Yeah, I mean, are you familiar with Sharia law?
No, I'm not. Okay. I'm not. But I'm just, whatever. I'm not going to get into a religious holy war here. I'm just telling you that when you act and you act in a terrorist way, I mean, all bets are off.
Right, but it's not like they're just doing terrorism just because they want to, or because they like just hate Americans just because. I mean,
I don't think Allah is telling these folks to go kill Christians.
I mean, that's what it says in their holy books. I mean, that's literally their calling is to basically take over the world. So, I mean, ask them; they'll tell you. They'll tell you that that's what they're trying to do. So,
all right, and we are way off the rails here. Maybe we should get like some religious leaders on here and talk about the different religions and all that.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah,
maybe a special guest segment. I
Christ
don't know.
is king. That's all I got to say.
We'll see. All right, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm a Catholic, for crying out loud. So's my friend Bob Watson. We're going to move on. Bob Watson, our State Farm agent, 7th and Main, Blue Springs, 816-229-7878. Auto, home, life, commercial insurance, licensed in both Missouri and Kansas. A great time to assess your insurance needs right now. Bundle your home and car insurance to save even more money. Bob Watson and his team can show you how to get that done. If you love State Farm because they got all the fun commercials with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Coach Reed, check out what they can do for you. I mean, it's one thing to entertain you with a commercial. It's another thing for what they can do for you to save money and be there when you need them. 816-229-7878. Bob Watson, State Farm Insurance. Okay, shout out to Vicki Wallace. She is a fan from Oklahoma. Called to my attention this. 70 to 80 bird species will be renamed by the American Ornithological Society to remove problematic names. I think Kamala Harris would be okay with this. It's equity in bird watching because they want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable watching birds. So they went through and they took out some names. I think one bird was named after a Confederate general. I have no idea why. They've got two birds that they've renamed that were named for the naturalist John James Audubon. One of America's earliest naturalists. In fact, there is a park right across the river from my hometown in Evansville, John James Audubon Park. It's in Henderson, Kentucky. So they better change that damn name.
Well, I don't know about you, but John James Audubon is just really keeping me up at night. That's really the issue.
It's something that you worry about. But we did a whole segment, we did a whole podcast on this early on in our run here. We took all of the NFL teams and made them all racist and or problematic. And we talked about the slippery slope, and some of our friends on the left were, you guys don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So how much of and John James Audubon apparently was a slave owner. I didn't know that. He also opposed abolition. So I guess as you dig into anybody, you can find out stuff about them that makes them problematic. So the question I've always asked is, are Thomas Jefferson and George Washington far away?
I mean, who knew that birds would be, the new frontier of the culture war?
Well, I hate birds to begin with because I'm terrified of them.
I think it's obvious that everyone is just like, this is keeping everyone up at night. They go to bed and they can't sleep because of racism of bird names. That's really the biggest problem that we have. And I think the only way to solve the problem is if we rename the birds instead of after, racist Americans from the past, we rename them for all of our heroes. We can name one George Floyd, we can name one Trayvon, we can name one, Breonna Taylor, and we can rename all the birds to fit the names that we want.
Is there an Al Sharpton bird?
There should be. There definitely should be.
The cuckoo bird.
Yeah, the cuckoo bird. We can name one Kamala. We can name a bird Kamala. That would probably be like the really loud, repetitive one that just,
See? Yeah, the mockingbird. And then we'll get in trouble for that. See, there's no end to the trouble that we can get into on this podcast, but it's good to know that the American Ornithological Society, I just love saying that, American Ornithological Society is there to help us with the problematic
really looking out
groups.
for our best interest.
Looking out for America. I'm looking out for my 401k and my IRA. And next week, hopefully, I'm going to be able to report to you that we've defeated the latest tax in Jackson County. Gosh, I hope so. I'm going to vote twice. Is that illegal?
No.
I'll just pretend I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, that's fine.
Until next week, this is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.